I will be counting the amount of times that you use the word of the day, and I will also be looking for colorful or descriptive language and uses of fillers such as ahs, ums, and other words like that.
And hopefully we won't get any impish looks from Haley if we say many times. Next, we'll invite our timer, Beverly, to come forward and tell us about her role. Please welcome Beverly.
It's important as we develop our topics to get a sense of an amount of time. So I'll be keeping track of time for the different areas that we have. When the speakers are speaking, they've given us a certain amount of time that they actually want. So when it gets down to 2 minutes left to that speech, I'll have the yellow card, or the green card up, and then the light to associate with that. With the 1 minute, it'll be the yellow, and then when time is expired, we'll have the red. The table topics, we're given 1 to 2 minutes for that. So when you get down to the 1 minute, you'll get the green light. 1.5 is the yellow, and 2 is the red. The evaluators as well have the 2 to 3 minutes for their speech. We look at when it's 2 minutes, the green, 2.5, and then 3. If anybody goes beyond excessively, we have the buzzer that Chris has got for us now, so that we can help you to really know that it's time to wrap it up. Thank you.
We'll get started right in with our speeches. We have 3 speeches today. And our first speaker is Chris Lucanville. And the title of his speech is I Shouldn't Be Alive, Almost. And he's speaking from the storytelling manual, the Let's Get Personal speech. And Chris is requesting 6 to 8 minutes for his speech. Please welcome Chris.
So, I Shouldn't Be Alive is actually a television show that I used to like watching a lot. I don't know, has anybody heard of this television show? It really follows the same premise, pretty much everyone. It's a recreation of an actual event that happens. And what happens, these people are going on kind of a mundane, maybe everyday adventure, going for a walk or going for a hike somewhere, maybe traveling across maybe a remote area. And what happens is there's always a point in the show where they make that, oh, they probably shouldn't have done that type of choice. And then after that, they find themselves in a situation where they don't know their surroundings, they're not prepared for the weather that they're in, they never have food, very rarely have water, and that's how the show goes every time. But there's always at least one person, right, that comes out alive, because they have a show about it, right? So somebody's got to be able to tell the story. And that was something, whenever I watched the show, I always thought to myself, how do these people get themselves into these situations, right? That just doesn't make sense. Until October of 2010, when I kind of found out. So it was late in October. My wife and I had gone up to Acadia National Park, which, if you've heard anything about it, it's on the coast of Maine, about halfway up the state. Beautiful national park. Not very big, maybe, well, relatively big. It's about 30 minutes to get across it, driving across it. There's one part of it that's got the Bar Harbor, Cadillac Mountain, a lot of the places that most people go and visit. But the entire park is just extremely beautiful in the fall, and that's why everybody goes there, right? The leaves are changing colors and falling. It's, just a beautiful, beautiful place to be in the fall, with the scenery around it. And you have the ocean right next to it, bringing in that ocean air, the salty ocean air, and it's just a gorgeous place to be. And so my wife and I, we decided we're going to go there. We're going to take the whole experience in, right? We went to more on the other side of the park, which is a little more relaxed, not quite as many people there. We're going to stay at a bed and breakfast, right? We're going to get the full experience of it. And the first day there at the bed and breakfast, we're talking a little bit to some of the other individuals that are staying there, the hosts of the bed and breakfast, and finding out a little bit, what is there to do here, right? Like, what can we do? And other than just go see all of the things, what's the things that we should try and do first? And one of the things that they mentioned was right up the road there was some nice little trails to go walk around on and enjoy the beauty as you're walking the trails. So the first thing both my wife and I think of is Gooseberry Falls, North Shore. It's, you know, what you did when you're a kid. You're walking with the handrails, you know, on the paths with the stairs. It's pretty safe stuff, right? It's a national park. They're not going to make it too scary for people. You know, like there's some legal issues here that people could get in trouble with. So that's just what we assumed, right? So we figured, well, we'll go there in the afternoon. We went and got some lunch at a little place in town, and it's just, you know, it's just picturesque, the whole thing, right? It's like just a little village there. There's not a lot of people around. It was after the busy part of the season, and that was the other thing that kind of made us think that this was, you know, the standard Gooseberry Falls experience. Is they were telling us that, you know, in the really busy part of the season, it's like back to back. You're just walking in a pack through this trail, right? Because there are just so many people that come to experience this. But luckily for us, we were basically right at the end of the season. Some of the shops were starting to close up already for the season. There weren't a ton of people there, and so we figured, well, this will be a good first introduction to it. So we pull up, and we drove there in our little red tin can of a rental car that you always get those just barely can survive the drive seams type of cars, and pull up to the trail. The trail sign's there. We walk in on the little dirt path, and we figure, well, the trail must be right up here past the sign. We'll get to it. We come into this opening, and it's beautiful. I mean, it's stunning. I mean, the leaves are changing, already starting to fall. They're starting to cover on the ground a little bit. But we're looking for the trail, and there's no trail here. So like, well, walk back down to the sign. Yep, we're going the right place. It says the trail we're going for. And go back up there and start looking, and here, the only thing we spot is this little blue dot on the rock. It's like just a little blue marker. We're like, well, that doesn't really fit. It's like something you'd see on a tree if they're going to cut it down in the forestry industry. And then we saw another one up past it, maybe another 20 yards up. Well, that's how they mark their trails. That's the trail where the blue dot is. And we're like, all right, fair enough. So we start walking this trail, and it is, I mean, you're going through, again, it's absolutely gorgeous there, so you're getting distracted by the view. But and the whole way, we're not seeing really anybody there. It's just emptied out because we're enjoying that fact, right? I mean, it's not busy at all. But we're actually having to climb up on some of these parts. We're actually climbing up like a rock face to continue the blue dot where it goes, right? We're like, all right, this is where we're supposed to go. And we get to the top of this beautiful trail. It's like the peak of the trail, and you have the overlook over the beautiful bay coming in, and all the sailboats in the bay, and the lobster boats with their cages on the side. It's seriously just what it should be on all of the postcards coming from this place, right? And so we've gotten there, and this is the first time we see anybody. There's a couple other people out there, and we figure, well, we'll head our way back, but maybe we'll just pick just a little different way to go back, just so that we can see a little bit more, right? It hasn't taken a long time. So yeah, you caught on to that one there, right? That was our, you probably shouldn't have done that moment. And so we start walking our way back, and we have, it's just the same beautiful trail. Again though, now we're starting to push, trees to the side to try and get through on this trail. Sometimes having to uncover the leaves to try and make sure we're still on the trail. And it's starting to get, a little bit darker, not extremely dark, but when we start noticing it is when we're taking pictures and we're like, that sun's not really in the right place for my picture here. Wait a minute, it's a little bit too low. We should probably start hurrying up. And of course, it's the same situation as the snow. We don't really know where we're going. We know the maps that we get at every little intersection that shows us where we should go next. We have a bottle of water between the two of us. Of course, no food, right? We're following the plot pretty well here. And we have basically a wind jacket that's covering us. And it's going to get cold. It's late fall. We're on the ocean. Not a really good idea. And so then the next stage of it, what really builds it up to us is we walk up to then the next little marker on the map of the intersection, which is a good thing in the fact that there's a marker that shows us where to go next. Bad thing in the fact that we shouldn't have come to another intersection before we got back to our car. And so now we know we are going in the wrong direction, in a different direction, not really sure where. But we think we're supposed to probably go back this other way, which is now just a guess after we were pretty sure we were going the right way in the beginning. And it's getting darker now. It's getting to the point where you could probably say it's starting to get dark out. And the experience that we had of when we were running back, and it was, again, it's gorgeous out, right? So you're trying to take everything in, but there was a point at the end when we were actually running through the woods saying, we gotta get back. It's getting dark, and you can't really run like crazy because it's, again, the rock cliffs, they tend to fall off quick. And the last point of it, we're coming around the corner, trying to see, is this the right path, the right road? Is that our beautiful red rental car is sitting there waiting for us, right in front of us, and we were safe.
You survived. I'm gonna get 1 minute for moderation. Okay, our next speaker is Chris Medee, our second Chris, and he is speaking from the Competent Communicator Manual, project number 6, requesting 5 to 7 minutes, and the title of his speech is Irrationalizations. Please welcome Chris.
Madam Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, and most distinguished guests. Please forgive me as I do not have a good speech prepared today. I planned to have a good speech prepared today, worthy of competing with any of Ahmed's speech when I found myself on the schedule last month. However, I only finally picked the topic last week. I did feel very good though, as those ideas just started pouring from my mind, down my arm, and that prose just flowed from my pen and my fingers and onto that paper. It was marvelous. So full of wit and wisdom and wonder. I was really content with myself as I sat writing in that little cafe, sipping on my acai pomegranate and blueberry smoothie. I myself was feeling like a healthy blend of Hemingway and Ellen as I sat and sculpted that rough speech. I had written almost the entire 5 to 7 minute speech, all about this recent blooming of a wonderful family friendship that I was writing about. But then I checked the time, and it was time for me to wrap up to go pick up my daughter. So, with a smile, I closed my fancy wallet pen and stuck it into my shirt pocket. I then took my young speech and tucked it into the folds of project number 6 of my Competent Communicator Manual. Ripe with accomplishment, I then went to go find my daughter. Thursday came, and I was busy cultivating that colorful speech in the rich garden of my mind. It was flourishing beautifully, but perhaps maybe a little too much. And then I began to think about pruning with it. I'll do that on Friday. But then Alex emailed me asking about some more details about Friday Night Poker. Oh yeah. Alex is a new friend related to this speech of this new family friendship that I'm writing about. So emailing, yes, Alex, we're both expected at this poker tournament. And yes, I also told my wife that we would be home at a fairly decent time. Excellent. I'll see you then. I had forgotten that there had been a recent rule change at this poker group that they now allowed buy-ins till whenever. Alex was one of those guys that bought back into the tournament at 10 p.m. He finally had enough and went home at 11 p.m. It was then that I decided to hasten my own departure by just going all in. No matter what the cards I had, I was going to go all in. I finally made it home at 12:35 that night. I went to sleep at 12:55. 5.5 hours later, I was reminded that we had acquired another impish little 8-year-old daughter temporarily while her parents attended a 5-day work conference in Arizona. My daughter's BFF is also from this friend, this family friendship that I was writing my speech about. I have no idea why they were camped out on the floor below my wife's side of the bed, nor do I know why that they decided to start whispering before dawn. I can only speculate that saying shh first thing in the morning at that time caused my brain to format and lose the previous 3 days of my memory. So, what do I do now? Well, I suppose I could, oh, do I talk about bread? I mean, that's an easy obsession for me, and it's still evolving, but no, I don't have time to make any more bread for the meeting, because if I talk about bread and I don't have any to share, I'm going to feel guilty. And the same goes for wood-fired pizzas. Although, no, Tuesday night, last night, and I still don't have a speech, so I apologize. But if I could ask you one favor, if you could please keep your eye out for a fancy wallet, and I seem to have lost it last Wednesday.
Great speech. A lot of fun on that one. Can you get a minute on the evaluation process? Our next speaker will be Nate, and he is speaking from the Competent Communicator Manual, his second speech. He's going to tell us about something I'm sure we all do a lot, how to be a power lifter.
Thank you, Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, and our guests. I guess my title should have been How to Train to Be a Powerlifter. Let's let that one word. But in the next couple minutes, I'll tell you about how you would go about training if you were interested in being a powerlifter. Now, the training that I follow and that I would recommend anyone to follow who is interested in powerlifting is called Westside Barbell, and it comes from the gym I belong to. And for those of you who don't know, Westside Barbell is the strongest gym in the world. They have 7 of the top 10 world record totals, hundreds of individual world records. Westside is home to 41 men who've bench pressed over 700 pounds raw, 23 who squatted over 1,000 pounds, and 18 who deadlifted over 800 pounds. So if you're serious about being a powerlifter, that's where you would go to learn to be strong. So a typical week would look like this. At the beginning of the week, you would do what's called your max effort days. So you would do your max effort squatting on Monday, max effort benching on Tuesday, and then your max effort deadlifting on Wednesday. Then you would take Thursday off, and then on Friday you would start your dynamic days, which you would do your dynamic benching on Friday, and then your dynamic deadlifting and squatting on Saturday, and then you take Sunday off. Now, the beginning of the week would be max effort days, and all that is heavy weightlifting. So you do heavy squats on Monday, heavy benching on Tuesday, heavy deadlifting on Wednesday. So what a max effort day consists of is, if you're benching, for example, you do your warm-up bench pressing, get all warmed up and everything, and then you would move on to what's called your work sets. And for max effort day, it's just 10 sets of 1 rep. So you'd just be doing 10 heavy reps. And then when you're done with your work sets, you would move on to what's called assistance exercises. And all assistance exercises are to train your particular weaknesses for that lift. So if you just got done bench pressing, most likely your assistance exercises are going to focus on your triceps and your upper back. And if you just got done squatting or deadlifting, your assistance exercises are going to focus on your posterior chain for sure, because that's where all your strength comes from in terms of lifting weights, is your back, your glutes, and your hamstrings. So if you wanted to be a good power lifter, you'd have to train that like it's your job. And an example of that is if you go to any gym, like all guys want to bench press a lot of weight, like it's like the thing to do. So if you go to a gym and you see people who, like guys who try to bench press a lot of weight, most likely they'll have really crappy form, and it's because they have a weak upper back. So what you'll see is they'll unrack the weight, and their shoulders will get shoved to the back of their capsules. Their ribcage will tilt up, and then their butt will get lifted up off the bench. And that's exactly that's just asking for an injury. And it's just because they have a weak upper back, especially their lats. And in the squat and the deadlift, what squats big weights is your glutes and your hamstrings and posterior chain. The deadlift is all posterior chain. So when you're done with your max effort days, you would take Thursday off, and then on Friday you would start your dynamic days. Now all dynamic days is speed training. In almost all sports, speed is what kind of separates the winners from the losers. And in lifting, it's no different. And but in lifting, it's not how fast you can run. It's something called your rate of force development, or your explosive strength. And every time you lift, you want to move the bar as fast as you can, as fast as you possibly can, because there's tons of scientific studies on powerlifting meets, and one of the 10 commandments is you have half a second to complete a lift. Otherwise, virtual certainty you're not going to complete the lift. Some of the elite lifters can grind them out, but no one else is going to. So and the difference between max effort day and a dynamic day is, max effort day you'll be actually lifting weights, putting weight on the bar. On the dynamic day you'll be using resistance bands or jump stretch bands. They'll be anchored to the floor and then they're put up around the bar. And there's 2 reasons you use bands on speed day instead of weights. One is safety, like if you're squatting, for example, and You squat as fast as you can. When you come up, you'll stop, but the bar will keep coming up a little bit up off your shoulders, and then it'll come back down and slam back on your traps. And
Alright, before we move on to the table topics, I just want to check to see if we have any announcements from any.
Along with a couple of other hot topics. So just know as club members, some of those things will be coming out shortly after that meeting. We'll get some dates set with it.
The TLI next Friday, next Saturday and 31st in Methodist. So that we would get some points for our club, so, and
For officer training.
officer training. That would be, how many do we need?
I think we need 3 more.
3 more points.
And I've heard back from most of the
Okay,
officers
yeah.
that will be coming back.
That's a week from Saturday.
Is it a week from or this?
Next Saturday,
This
31st.
next- Yeah, yeah. Any other announcements? All right, I just want to take a couple minutes to welcome our guests. And would you like to introduce yourself and say anything?
Some wonderful speeches today, and I'm happy to report that they align closely with some of the questions that I was looking at for table topics. So Chris, number 1, talked to us about things that might cause you not to, you shouldn't be alive. And so my first question is, if you could do something dangerous just once with no risk, what would you do? So if you could do something dangerous just once with no risk, what would you do? And I know most people have a role here. I'm not sure if there's certain individual that would.
Oh, wow. Mr. Melissa, the other general manager. I can tell that one.
Okay, yeah, just give me an idea who doesn't have a role. So, Amy, I'm going to ask you to come up with a question.
Should have volunteered quicker.
If you could do something dangerous just once with no risk, what would you do?
If I could do something dangerous just once, other than come to Toastmasters for the first time and standing up here, one of my other big fears, and so danger, fear, it all goes together for me. I have an awful fear of heights. And I was pregnant at the time. We went up to Itasca State Park, and I was determined that I was going to climb the fire lookout tower at Itasca State Park. It was, beautiful, pine trees, tall. So here I am. I'm gonna do it. And I started up, and I don't know how many floors I got up when that little started to come into play, and my knees started to get a little weak, and I'm gonna do it. Strong. Kept going. I finally got to the top of that tower like this. Crawling up the stairs. And I never stood at the top. There's the landing up there. There's a barricade about so high that so you can see and you have a good view out. I did not look out and over. I looked through the inch between the floor and that barricade on my hands and knees. Yep, great, good view. Okay, I'm maneuvering back down now the stairs. I did it. It was the only time I'll ever do it, that time or going forward. Fear of heights, if I could do one thing without fear, without risk, I would skydive. I would do it. I will never do it. If that were the case.
Thank you, Amy. Now, second, Chris, number 2, gave us a speech about not having a speech prepared. So my second question is, if you're in denial about one thing, what is it? Because you had a great speech prepared. So if you're in denial about one thing, what is it? Melissa, I'm going to invite you up to answer that.
Good
afternoon, fellow Toastmasters and most distinguished guests. What a perfect question. I have a story. Once upon a time, I had my oldest son getting married, and about 18 months later, he determined, or they determined that they were going to have children. And I said, what? I'm not going to be a grandmother. What do you mean? Well, they decided, anyway, even against my complaints, they decided that they were going to have children. Children number 1, children number 2, children number 3, children number 4, all girls. And they range from 2 years to 11. The point of denial was when the first one was born, and I said, you are not calling me grandmother. I will refer you as my son's daughter. That was so true. It took me more than a whole year to get past that. Well, 12 years later, 4 granddaughters, I'm not in denial anymore. Now I'm in denial that I am getting older. But that goes with grandma too. I'm not sure. I think I'm still on denial. I think I'm on denial that I was on denial. Because my grandkids, they don't call me grandma. And I enforce that.
I have one more, yes, because Nate gave us a great speech on powerlifting. And so my last question is, which historical sporting event would you like to witness? Which historical sporting event would you like to witness? And Nate, I normally would do this because I know you gave a speech, but you gave a great speech about powerlifting. I've talked to you about football before, and I think you have some great answers to this question. So would you be willing to come up and answer what historical?
So what sport would I like to go back and see? I forget, it's like the Coliseum, like the Gladiators. I would like to go and see that, or like, I remember watching the History Channel one time and they talked about like, it was like an early form of basketball. There was like a ring like that, and I guess they used like a person's head as the ball and they kicked it around and stuff. That would be kind of cool. And they were completely naked. They played naked. I wouldn't want to see that. I just would like to see them play their games and stuff in the early athletes. That's what I'd like to go see.
You have interesting hobbies.
Great topics. And good speeches from everybody. That was really entertaining. Now is the portion where we move into the general evaluation part of the meeting. We don't have a general evaluator, so I'm going to hand it over to me. Which will flows nicely as topic master, I think. And my role will be to introduce all of the evaluators, evaluating the speakers, as well as at the end giving just an overall evaluation of the meeting as a whole. To begin this portion, we'll start with Abby to give the evaluation for Chris the Keynote speech. Welcome, Abby.
Thank you. I'm going to evaluate your speech, Chris, and it was a wonderful speech. You handed me your storytelling communication book, and so I want to say one thing. I'm also working on this book, and I feel the one thing that we lack in is enough time for storytelling in this particular category. It's really tough to hold down, and I think you did an amazing job trying to put all of the kind of the foreplay part of it, where this is what I'm doing, this is how I linked it to the story, here's my story, here are my characters, here's kind of the climax, and here's what we did to kind of move through it at the end. And you got it all in that time. It felt like it was a little rushed at the end, but it's a lot to do in that time frame. The evaluation portion of it, they ask you a few questions in the manual, and one is, did you kind of give us the point or the plot up front, so we kind of knew what you were going to go through, and yes, you did. You linked it to the television show, and your journey on your travels with your wife to the point in Maine that you were going. We talked about the national park and how wonderful and picturesque it was, and we used a lot of colorful language in that to describe it. So the whole room was really kind of following you along on that trail. And then when you described the Blue Dot Trail, I think that really stuck in my mind as a really key component of it. And how we followed along as you described this, and then at your climax, you didn't really even need to do it, it was part of your story. But it was, do we decide to go back this way or that way? And it was right at that point where you kind of described and you went back, how you journeyed back to your car. And through that, the characters were developed because we heard through your personality and your words and your language and how you described it, how you are at that time in the story. So that was really strong. Again, great colorful words and descriptive words. And we followed you through on that trail, on that journey. A couple of comments that I jotted down that I wanted to add to that. I think it was your children that you had mentioned before you gave your speech in their little impish ways. They kept you up all night, so you had no sleep. So I think you also did an amazing job of being a parent also to make it through all that. And still, I think you only put a few connectors or ands and ums in there, so it was really good. I think out of all of your speech, you have strength, personality, you have gestures, you have really good eye contact, you hit all the areas in the room. I think the connectors were maybe the thing that is slowing you down just a little bit. Try and work on that. And I noticed that you started using and then at the end of it, when you're kind of slowing down, you're using so a lot. Again, maybe you ran out of time. So when you're preparing your speech, consider if it is a really long speech. I did this too. I'm like, there is no way I can fit all of this in here and make it a good speech. So maybe think about splitting it up. Like, tell us how you got there, maybe the climax, and then perhaps you come back and explain how you got back to your car. If you're not going to do that, you need to cut a lot of the fun of it out. And I think you kind of mentioned that as well. So, thank you very much.
Okay, next we have Joe, and he'll be evaluating Chris Middy's speech. Please welcome Joe.
Well, I don't know how you would feel, but if you go and talk to someone you're going to evaluate, and he says, I don't really have a speech, he says, it's just going to be a terrible experience. And you think to yourself, what am I going to do? So, thanks for helping me out. I actually wasn't prepared for an impish criticism of poking fun at giving a speech. It was a joy to have fun made at our expense. And I thank you very much for that. Obviously, you used wonderful gestures and wonderful vocal variety, all that you were supposed to in this thing. And what I would like to say is, if you had to change any part of it, I would have liked to have, after all this gloom and depression and unhappiness, I'd like to have a high point at the end. I'd like to have some kind of an exciting climax, just for variety's sake. But please, take my thanks for the humor that you showed and for having so much fun at our expense. Thank you for that.
And our last evaluator is Amit, and he'll be evaluating the speech. Please welcome Amit.
Madam Toastmaster, Madam General Evaluator, my fellow Toastmaster and most distinguished guest, and most important, Nate. I know you personally from the few times I've met you, and I find the combination which is in you, which you still have to unravel. And I think these speeches you're giving is going to help you. You've got a wicked humor, sense of humor, and you're also a writer. On top of that, you've got a lot of other gifts which we are finding out from your speeches. I had no criticism directly on the speech. The content was pretty dense. But let me demonstrate to you how you can make your speech into a humor speech, a visualization speech. You can use anything from vocal variety to giving us a much better understanding. I would just say that since you had so many things, you could tell us what you're going to tell us. Then you told us what you will tell, and then finally you summarize. These are the three components of the talk, organize your speech, which you're going to use. So when you use the thing about the 7 days thing which you do in powerlifting, one is a squatting. Well, I won't squat because I don't know whether I can get up. But you could demonstrate one day what you do squatting, the second day what you do with a dynamic push, the third day what you do, and the rest is rest, you know, and then you do that. You could have a lot of props in your talk. I would bring a gallon of milk here. Show what it means, a gallon of milk. This is how I drink a gallon of milk to develop my muscles. I would actually squat in the floor and boom, 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 do all those power pushes. Get the audience back. Remember, you're speaking on a topic which we don't understand, which is new to us. So one of the tricks about getting your audience into it is either talk to a topic which everybody understands, or bring them rapidly to the topic which you want to know. So you have to be very dynamic and give a whole bunch of actions to get people involved. That's number one. And the humor part of it is all those different props you can show. My idea about personal training is walking with my personal trainer, which is walking with my dog. So you can understand my level of commitment. So there are many other people like that, so you have to bring them up. Regarding everything else which you said, the conclusion ended almost with a bottle of milk. So I would kind of bring the conclusion of more of a humor thing. I would start it as to, have you ever seen a powerlifting competition? Imagine the right side of the room and the left side of the room. So there may be 300 pounds here and 300 pounds here. We have lifters who could lift Joe, Amy, and everybody on this side and that side. I mean, if you think about it, somebody is there who can lift all of us together, right? So you see the visualization. So you get us involved with a hook right away. And you got enough material, I know you have it. So these are some of my suggestions. I hope the next few speeches you will incorporate it. And we will see the Nate which I have in my mind. I know you can be a powerful lifter and a more powerful speaker. Madam Toastmaster.
And next I'll hand it over to our grammarian, Kaylee, to tell us about word usage and grammar usage.
I will start from the top with the word of the day. And we had 4 people that used the word of the day. Sarah, Chris, and Abby, and Joe all used the word impish. And next I'll just go person by person on how everybody did for ums, ahs, filler words. Chris L, we had 12 ums, 9 ahs, 9 you knows, and at least 7 rights. In the beginning I wasn't counting the rights because I thought that they were part of the speech, but then they continued on a little bit too frequent, so I started to count them. And that was it for you. Bev had 1 moving on to Chris N. I like the use of that your prose were flowing, your wit and wisdom, your healthy blend of Hemingway, and ripe with accomplishment. Those were all really good descriptive words, and I didn't hear any ahs, ums, none of those fillers in your speech. Nate, I heard 5 ums, and I didn't count the so's. That is a word that was leaned on a little bit, but I also understand when you're trying to describe in a sequence of actions that you're taking, it's hard to kind of not use that word, but that was something that I noticed. And then I heard like 5 times as well. And then moving on to table topics, Amy had 2 ums, Elizabeth, I didn't hear any. Nate, for your table topics, I just heard 1 and 3 likes. And then for Abby, just 2 ums. Alrighty, and that is my report.
And we also have our timer who's going to give our timer report.
Jump that just from here? Okay.
So to start with, Chris, he had asked for 6 to 8 minutes, and he had 8 minutes 34 seconds. Chris Nibby had 5 to 7 minutes that he had asked for, and he did 6 minutes and 3 seconds. Nate had asked for 5 to 7, and he was right in the ballpark, 5 minutes 46 seconds. Table topics, Amy was 1 minute even. Elizabeth, 1 minute 59 seconds. Nate at 38. Abby with the evaluation was 3 minutes and 7 seconds, so just barely over. Joe was 1 minute 20 seconds, and Amit was 3 minutes 22 seconds.
And as general evaluator, I'll be very brief because we're almost out of time, but great use of humor through the entire meeting today. Everything was funny, even the evaluations were funny. Everything was great. And in the evaluations, a really nice job of just pointing out what the speakers do well, in addition to following up with some suggestions on improving the speech. And I especially like the suggestion on maybe splitting up the speech into 2 speeches, especially if somebody struggles with coming up with a topic. I'm going to keep that in mind for myself as I come up with speeches. I'll just make 1 into 2. Amit, really good evaluation and very encouraging. You're really good at pointing out what we can do to unleash the skills that we do have, just bringing those forward. So that was really nice. And Joe, your evaluation was very funny. I really enjoyed that. And the thought of having to evaluate something that doesn't even exist, there is no speech. So that was good to hear. And in general, I think the meeting went really well. And thanks to Beverly for filling in as the timer. Thanks to myself for filling in this general evaluation. It was very difficult. And then just speaking as Toastmaster, I don't have anything else to say. And all around, great speech, good humor, and thanks everybody for coming, and welcome again. And please come back as often as you like. I'd be glad to have you. Thank you.
Because